Alex Kergall is a high-performance coach described as one of London's top coaches by Influence Digest and the recipient of the Innovative Executive Coach of the Year award. Alex also sits on the Forbes Coaches Council and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Public Health. His clients range from high-velocity scale-up businesses to world-class athletes. His mission is to support change makers in actualizing and amplifying their positive impact in the world.
So you've got to be very clear about what you want. And that's one of the critical questions I very often ask.
How do I know how well I'm performing every day?
Yes, thank you. So we felt, okay, so what? What's happening? Let's dive into it. Let's learn from it. Self-love is such a powerful and transformative way to look at performance. You don't need to suffer, to go where you want to go.
Alex, I'm beyond excited about having you on because I feel you might cure a load of things that I've got in my mind that need solving. It feels like problem solution is exactly where you come from and the thing that you excel at. I want to start by asking you, how do I know how well I'm performing every day? How do I know if I'm underperforming or performing to the best of my abilities? Is there a way of being able to somehow quantify and qualify that?
There are many ways, we could approach it, but you probably have a sense deep inside if there is something that you can do better. It's quite interesting because sometimes we think about, comparing ourselves with other people, where actually you just look inside. How do I really feel compared to who I was yesterday and who I want to become? So I think it's more of an inner game.
So how do we start that process then? If we're not somebody who's stereotypically comfortable with that self-analysis and self-assessment, how do we start to learn how to do that and how to do it better so that we can ultimately achieve better performance?
So I think it's interesting, the approach with performance where we used to look at performance from an angle of measuring and improving and going in some tough moments. And then I think, when it comes to actually, there is some other level when you go deep inside, in terms of the belief. What is the belief that makes you want to perform to a certain level? But then when you go kind of inside, you realize that performance, comes down to something that is closer to self-love. And I like to approach performance not so much from a mechanical standpoint, but more from a self-love. Self-love is like the deepest kind of the innate nature of your state of well-being. When you think about, self-love and you can measure how worthy you are, by connecting with self-love. So I think there is this regular approach of performance, mechanical approach that we can have. And there is this kind of inner approach that is not so much about mental toughness, where mental toughness can be more a kind of a shield against adversity. It's just reframing how you look at performance, because often you think about, am I good enough? And that's where you tune in. Because when you think about it, it could be like climbing a mountain. And imagine like climbing a mountain and you could start with, would you climb your Everest with flip-flops? Or sometimes, we climb the mountain, but you've got kind of blisters along the way. And so you kind of ignore them. You just kind of, you want to be tough. And actually, are you going to go to the top of the mountain where there is this kind of journey of looking after yourself, and that is not only kind of helping you in your performance, but it can really transform it and how you approach performance.
We talk a lot in sport about marginal gains and being able to incrementally change the dial and shift things up so that the performance is as maximised and as optimised as it possibly can be. in business, with the CEOs that you've worked with, in professional sport, because you've worked with a lot of elite footballers as well, what are the areas that are the common problems? What are the common problem areas? Because there must be some denominators amongst groups of people that are highly driven professionals where performance is a problem or where they're looking for areas to improve. What have you seen as those common denominators amongst those types of people?
So let me answer that question by sharing a little bit more about the people I look after. And so let me take you back to in time. There is a book that was written called The Medici Effect. And it's about the Medici family back in the 14th century in Florence, in Italy. And at the time, it was just the beginning of the Renaissance. And they attracted philosophers, sculptors, painters, and all these people created intersection, between themselves. And it just, was such a boost for innovation. And so that's why we still remember, the Medici family. When I look at coaching, I love to work with people from so many different fields and cultures. I can be inspired from working on something very specific with a footballer that you can apply with an investor, that you can also apply with a CEO. You move from tech, you move from Mexico to Johannesburg, and you move from a culture to another one. So it just kind of really creates an ecosystem. And I think for me as a coach, you can pick up from multiple areas how to improve people. Then another layer is the belief system that you create, because you make your beliefs and then your beliefs make you. It's just a loop that is created, and how you question yourself about your beliefs. An example is, I am not good enough, or I don't deserve it. Self-confidence that you see, I see regularly. So I think what I'm trying to say is, it's just a belief that you create. It just goes as a mental loop, and you can get stuck into that. So that's one of the things I see regularly. So for me as a coach is moving from an industry to another one is how you can create new territories, how you can help people to ask themselves quality questions that are going to drive quality decisions. And from quality decisions, you can move to quality actions. So I think, the common thing I see are naturally the belief system, but also the willingness to run 100 meters again and again and again, and not running a marathon. If you really want to do some big things, you just got to play a longer game. And sometimes it's very intense. So finding the boundaries is critical. And as we talk about boundaries, that's an interesting one. There is something I like I've kind of noticed after thousands of hours of coaching is what I call the upside down. The upside down is how usually people look at things and how high performers look at things. And if I was to give you a couple of examples, if you think about the combo, business, family, and personal. I want to have an amazing career so I can look after my family and I'm going to feel good. You've got to take this upside down, because if you don't, and what I've noticed is you end up in burnout because you work so much that you've got nothing left for your family and very little left for yourself, or very often, almost nothing. So if you play around, and you start by yourself, I feel strong, I'm good, I'm happy with what I do, so I can spend time with my family, which very often corporate athletes and sport athletes would tell me, family is the most important thing for me. And that's a question I would often ask, what's the most important? Business or family? family. Okay, so let's reshuffle things. You look after yourself first, then family, and then business. It's counterintuitive because you spend a lot more time working. So that's one of the part of the upside down. Another one is the combo having, doing, being. I want to accumulate a lot of things so I can do this and I can be happy. Upside down. First, you need to feel really good, be connected with, aligned with what you want to do, and then you can move to the doing, and then you can have what you want. It works the same with time. We said, are you what you want, or are you kind of bringing right now in the present the future? Very often we see the future as something quite distant. But when you bring it in the present and you behave right now as who you want to be, you bring in the present the future. And just playing with time is just so important because we nourish fears about, becoming this. And so you bring it in the present. And then the last one is when you want more, be more, very often you do more. You need to flip that as well. It's actually by doing less that you become more, and how you really zoom into some very specific areas of what you want to do.
When you talk about the upside down approach, that chimes so much with me, and I'm sure it does with many other people. But how do you make that an actual practical reality? How do you get these people that are seriously highly driven professionals who all probably do want to put family first, but fundamentally a meeting goes in the diary and suddenly, that school play or whatever it is gets pushed down the line of importance, and the thing that ends up counting for more is that meeting that absolutely can't be changed. How do you get people to see it and then make it actually a reality and happen? Because I'm sure many people would be, of course my family comes first before my business, but how do they implement it?
Naturally, this is not easy. It comes down to priorities. And you just said this meaning is absolutely important to me. Is it? How important? Let's talk about it. And you just weigh your priorities. Naturally, when you get into that, we come back to the last part of the upside down, which is less is more. Do you have to be involved in so many things that you do in your life? Because think of it like beam of lights. If you've got many beams of light, it's just going to go to a certain distance. But if you got less, it's going to go with the same level of energy. It can go a lot further. So one example I had recently is an exec where, his wife pregnant. There's a lot going on at home. Business is just booming. There is a lot of things. And we talk about it and say, Alex, just at home, it's just not easy. And so it's having an impact on the work. And naturally, so the question is, what is the most important to you? It's a simple question, but when you come to the realization that you've got to be there for your family, then you start to find solutions. Then you start to be, you've got to be pushed sometimes to make these kind of decisions. So it's probably better to be proactive than reactive. But we come back to the loop that we were talking about, the belief that you've got to do so many things, the belief that, you have to achieve to actually love yourself. Do you need all that? What does that bring you? So you see the game on the external and the internal is so important because your mind is the workshop of your life, and then reality will catch up. But so you've got to be very clear about what you want. And that's one of the critical questions I very often ask. What do you want? And if I was, we were to have this conversation and we dive into details, Georgie, I'm going to ask you, what do you want? And then we're going to look and we're going to consider everything you've got, on your plate. And we're going to consider what is the most important to you. And then we're going to have to make some decisions. And it's not so easy when you are by yourself, because asking yourself quality questions when you have your loop of belief is not so easy. So that's where it's interesting to have a coach, and I have a coach, because I have my own loops and beliefs, and I need to be challenged. And with someone who's going to ask me questions that I would not ask myself about what is important, what do you want? And then the second point is, once you're pretty clear about what you want, which often as a coach, I spend quite a bit of time on, because also you've got some beliefs that I believe I can just get there when you can go a lot further. So you just in the what do you want, there's a lot going on. And then the second point is, do you kind of want it? Are you interested to get it? Or are you committed to get it? And you see the level of intention and commitment is also very important, because you can be, I love my family, but then you spend so much time at work. So you're not really committed. It's just like something you say. And it's so important from a coaching perspective, because coaching is about the present, the action, and the future. We land coaching sessions on action, just not a chat. I mean, that's the kind of coaching I deliver. If you want to have a chat, go talk to a friend. If you really want to move things, let's talk.
And what do you do when somebody says to you, okay, so I've made this extra time, I've said family first, and I've put sort of business, down the pecking order a little. And yet what invariably happens is they're sat in that family environment, but maybe on their phone. And so not being there's such a thing, isn't there, as being present and also just not being present. I mean, what is your advice on that? Because that, I think, is one of the common problems facing all of us in this world in which we live in, is that just put the phone down. But it's so much harder to actually do than it is to think that you would want to do it.
So what I would share here is this. Being fully present, 100% present in the now is the best way to build a good future. What often happens is you are 25% thinking about stuff, and our mind can be like a misbehaved dog chasing squirrels and thinking about the past and things, in distracting you from being in the present. So if you consider being 25% in the past, and then you've got another 25% thinking about work and things or other things that what you do, then you effectively have only 50% of yourself in the now. And having only half of you in the now, what is going to be the impact on your future?